Okay, hello. This video is going over some terms in the K-6 Catholic Anthropology program for the Diocese of Owensboro. This video is going to be for parents and teachers, not for younger children, because we're going to be addressing terms that some parents would feel uncomfortable introducing their children to. We're only going to be discussing those terms that are used in society where society seems to have a different understanding of the definition. So we're going to clarify the distinctions in those and the way the church understands certain terms that are being presented at an early age in our diocese and for the reasons that they are. So the first term is actually in the image and likeness of God. And it's going to take so long to unpack that. We're going to do another video on what it means to be made in the image and likeness of God. Imago Dei. Imago Dei is what we call, it's kind of like the name of, so in our booklet we're going to have cartoon characters and they're all going to be named Imago Dei. Imago Dei means image of God. It's Latin for image of God. Little trivia here, the reason why the church uses Latin is because it's a dead language. Yeah, so the meanings do not evolve. They're clear and definitive and unchanging. So Imago Dei, coming soon to a booklet near you. Catholic Anthropology, discussed in another early video. Anthropology, the study of mankind. Secular anthropology, we love secular, it's good because it studies truth. We learn a lot from it. It is looking at mankind throughout history in all cultures and places without reference to that God. Christian, coursework, all Catholics are Christian. It's through the lens with Jesus Christ as God and fully man entering into our time and space. The Catholic worldview, the Catholic dimension, we learn later, it's going to be very sacramental, where the unity of the body and soul, being able to see the spiritual within and beyond the physical, is present. It's ecclesiastical, okay, because we have faith in the church that Jesus established and remains within. So you will be seeing those terms later. This all is put in another word, the Catholic worldview. It's the lens through which we view the realities of this world. And in it, we've already mentioned that it's going to be sacramental, it's Trinitarian, it's ecclesial. We're going to be able to see truth in all things where it is. And one of the things that's going to be also emphasized is that faith, science, and reason in the Catholic worldview are completely compatible. This is going to be important when studying Genesis and the stories of Scripture. Because, as we learn, Genesis is not in contradiction to theories in creation, whether it be the Big Bang or evolution. Whatever we learn in science as true, now those are theories, whatever we learn in science as true can't contradict itself, right? In studying Scripture, and this is where some parents may necessarily feel comfortable in discussing with their students that Genesis is not necessarily to be taken literally. Okay, it is an allegorical genre. Hermeneutics is used in the introduction, saying that we study Scripture. There's a way to study it where you study when it was written, by whom it was written, to whom it was written, and how it was understood at that time, the intent of the author, what literary genre, etc., etc., the language. Genesis, the first 5 stories in Scripture, were written allegorically. Okay, so we believe the principles in Genesis. God made everything. God made everything good. God made man in his image and likeness, gave him the breath of life, gave man a free will. Man chose, used his free will, and separated himself from God, so on and so forth. Those are the principles that we're sticking to. And the very primary grades, We address it. Um, it could almost seem literally, but when we get to 6th grade, we do mention that Genesis is to be taken allegorically. You're welcome to, obviously, teach your students. They seem to, when I mentioned it, they seem to understand that it's something written as a parable or as an allegory represents a greater truth and are not scandalized by it. I don't want to see Jesus going out the window with Santa Claus when they start questioning reality. So I love to present the church as intelligent, but as a teacher and a parent, it's good for you to understand this, and that we need not be scared of science, nor of thinking that Genesis is going to be in contradiction to anything. Some other terms that you're going to hear a lot in each grade: body, soul, intellect, free will, and passions, which are the emotions. These words are used way back in Greek philosophy, but in society, how they are understood and the priority in which they are placed differs from the way the church has presented them historically throughout history, and so we're going to acknowledge those things today. The first one is it's important to make sure that we communicate that the person, the human person, is a composite, a unity of body and soul, that they aren't two things opposed to each other in contradiction in any kind of dualistic form. In society, you can have a variety of extremes. In history, you can trace different philosophies and heresies throughout history that might have emphasized one over the other. In today's society, it might look like someone who just is like all science, in one sense, and the emphasis on the body just sees us as animals, rational animals, but love is just a chemical reaction or a psychological construct. It tends to lessen our sense of responsibility for our choices. It affects how we view the other person. So that is, it's an almost Gnostic way, going back to the 2nd century way of thinking. There's another dimension where the emphasis is on the spiritual aspect of ourselves. I think, this is my own opinion, but a big tendency is to almost place feelings above everything else. And that is addressed starting kindergarten on. Our identity is not going to be in how we feel. Our identity is not in how I think. Some philosophers said, I think, therefore I am, Descartes, or whatever. We are not the sum of our thoughts, okay? We are not, our dignity doesn't rest in our choices. And we tend to think, well, those that are killers in prison have less dignity. And we're going to find out later that's actually not true. Okay, our dignity rests in our being created in the image and likeness of God and what that means. Understanding those terms. Over-spiritualizing things can turn reality into a subjective, morality into a subjective opinion. It's relativism when truth is based on our opinion, and truth does not exist outside of your opinion in one sense. It's a long story. It's a long story. There's a lot written on it. What you need to know is that we need to present body and soul as a unity, as a composite. And so when after 6th grade they're presented with the variety of issues that maybe come up in this day, that where we question our identity based on our feelings or our sexuality, all these things, they'll have a better language and be better equipped to work with those issues. The body and soul unity concept is discussed a lot in what many Catholic middle school and high school students study in theology of the bodies. In the younger grades, we're talking about how our bodies communicate for the soul, whether it's in speech, facial expressions, hugs, acts of charity. Okay? It's important in how we understand ourselves psychologically, appreciating our identity. Our identity is not just a feeling. Our identity is who we are, body and soul. How we learn things is very important. We learn things by our five senses, so the body is necessary for that. It's not just something that comes from the imagination and so on and so forth. Responds to Catholic social teaching, responding to others physically. And then later, when we start questioning the elements of the faith, being able to, we can better understand who Jesus is, fully God, fully man, why the church and the sacraments have those external signs. They're not superstitious. They're representing the invisible reality of grace underneath. And it helps us appreciate the role that science and creation has in the betterment and the goodness of mankind. So that sacramental worldview of the human person, of the church, is integrated throughout all the grades, but mostly in second and fifth. Second, First Communion, Reconciliation. In fifth grade, you get usually in most curriculums, you get an overview of all the sacraments. So that's all tied together there. The terms going to the soul. Our soul, technically in philosophy, is the animating principle. So this isn't mentioned in the curriculum because it's confusing, but technically animals and plants have souls when they're alive, because the soul is the animating, the life principle in it. The human soul is different on so very many levels, from Genesis, being given life through God's breath, okay? The immortality of the soul, being made in his image and likeness, the dignity, the rationality, so many different levels, okay? What we're focusing on, though, besides being made in the image and likeness of God, is we're focusing on the parts of the spiritual parts of ourselves. We're going to use the term intellect, interchange it with reason, using our reason, forming our conscience. We form our conscience through what we see and hear, okay, because knowledge comes through the senses. Thinking, we're rational animals. And then we use the term free will and emphasize the importance of choice, okay, and responsibility, because every choice has a consequence. We're going to learn that love and sin are choices, not feelings. All right? Feelings. The Catechism of the Catholic Church uses the word passions, so we're including that interchangeably so that when the students later read the Catechism, they're not taken off guard. But our feelings in themselves are morally neutral. They're neither good nor bad. A really good movie, actually, for young children is the movie Inside Out, talking about the distinctions in the feelings, and it's a good movie, so it can be recommended. Feelings show us what we care about. For instance, fear. We become fearful when we need to protect something. Well, what is that something that we love, we care about? We're sad when we lose something. What is it that we loved that we're sad about? Feelings can help or hinder decision making. But the emphasis in this program is that they should not be the reason for our decision making. We need to think and use our reason and our mind before we act. And even understanding the role of our feelings in that process, how they're there, but what is the right thing to do, kind of thing. Love is going to be mentioned later. The highest form of love is a choice. The fluffy, wuffy feelings that one gets in love, it's good. It's not bad. But that doesn't affect necessarily our moral quality and is not necessarily love. So if you could choose an order, society might place feelings as the top priority. I feel this way, therefore I am this way. I feel this way, so you should let me do what I want. Free will is actually the highest choice because it is in our will where we love, choose to love, or choose to be selfish. Sin. Right? Intellect is next because it informs our free will. It judges for us. We form our conscience in our intellect by what we see and hear. So all of these terms are going to be started in kindergarten and used repeatedly, trying to drive home the message to think before we act and the importance where love and sin reside. inside. When we talk about this, it is our free will with reason that gives us freedom. This is another distinction that is explained very well in church documents, Veritatis Splendor, in the Catechism. It's the understanding of what is freedom. Society might see freedom as a license to do whatever we want. I'm free to run around the classroom and yell fire if I want to. And we try, it's a hard concept, but we are trying to start in younger grades. The more you do what is good, the freer you become. There are great sports and music analogies, right, for freedom. If you practice this over and over again, it becomes automatic, where you become free to do the more critical aspects of the game or the job. So freedom in the bigger context of things, we're built for love. We are made from love, out of love, for love. So we're giving freedom for the sake of love. And the more we do what is good, the freer we become. And doing what is good, and when it becomes a habit, we call that a virtue. And so we use the word virtue, and the fact that it takes practice. We have to, if we want to be good at something, we practice and practice, right? And virtue is a good habit. And so we do mention that in the program. The more one does what is good, the freer one becomes. Okay, so those terms are mentioned in there, a little bit different than the way society views things. One of the most misunderstood, I'm not the only one that holds this opinion, but it's not data-driven, but I think one of the biggest misunderstood words is the word disorder. The word disorder is used in the Catechism, and sometimes you're going to see later in the terms of homosexuality, it says it's an intrinsic disorder. And people think, oh, that means you're calling this person evil and bad and a sinner with no dignity, and that is so far from it. So we need to understand the meaning of order and disorder. We start in kindergarten, okay, by saying that God made everything with a purpose. There's no mistake. I know, even mosquitoes have a purpose. The circle of life. And we need to fulfill our purpose, okay, on earth. It is, and there's an order in all creation. Math and science can see that a little bit more. In the human person, there's an order. We know that when we have behavioral disorders, okay, it's when something it's not fulfilling the purpose for which it was made. It's easy to see with digestion, right? You might have an eating disorder if all you eat is red Jell-O and nothing else, because the purpose for which your digestion system and your appetite, okay, the reason why you have that appetite is so you will give yourself the nutrients to help sustain your life. And when that is interrupted, there's a disorder in it because the purpose isn't being reached. So it's important, we're going to be making the distinction, a disorder. We all have a kind of disorder. I have a disorder in my eyes. I need glasses, okay? It can take any form. The disorder itself is not a sin. It is not making you any less in dignity. Feelings themselves might be disordered in the sense, but they're not necessarily sinful. In the Catechism, by the way, in this program, we're not mentioning specific disorders. We're not mentioning homosexuality. But this is it's a very controversial thing in the way it is phrased. It mentions it that it is disordered, okay, feeling. The feeling is not necessarily sinful. It's a disorder because it is not fulfilling the purpose for which we were created. It only becomes a sin when you choose to act on it or something, okay? A person who has same-sex attraction can go straight to heaven, right? It doesn't make someone less in dignity. So we're not mentioning this in the kindergarten through 6th grade, but we are trying to get them ready to understand that things have an order And even in our person, feelings and choice, there's an order, okay, to get them ready for the concepts when they encounter. So to repeat, in the morality of an action, all the aspects of the human person are important. The emotions, the intellect, the free will, the five senses that take in the information and form our conscience, and then our bodies, the way we communicate it. And as a reminder that free will is the most important, our choices, because there is the place of love and sin. Feelings are morally neutral. And that is hard because we feel a lot of things, and it's hard. This is, I hate to insult your intelligence, many of you have heard this before, but so many languages have many definitions for love. Greek has a lot, I think 9. These are the top 4 I did from a Google image, and we're emphasizing the highest. And we're only mentioning the highest, and it's the agape love. And the agape love is the unconditional and sacrificial love. Mirrored in Jesus Christ, God's love for humanity. And we were created out of that love and for that love and made capable, as anthropology shows us, to love in that way. The definition of love doesn't just roll off the tongue. The definition of love in the Catechism is to will the good of the other. It comes from a definition from Thomas Aquinas. It's probably going to have to be memorized before it's understood. Okay? To will the good of the other as other, which means for their interest and not in your interest. John Paul II's theology out of love and responsibility in his Angelus homilies and other things, the opposite of love is to use, is selfishness. To use another for your own gain, it's selfishness. Love versus sin, right? That term is going to be mentioned, agape love as a choice is going to be mentioned at the earliest, and it's going to be seen as a choice, and it's not, I mean, I can't put it into practice well yet, but it is something that's good to constantly repeat. So all these terms that we've had in this mentioning of terms and why I hope you see why these terms are important as we ready the students to form their identity of themselves, who they are, made in the image and likeness of God. And by their choices, they help shape their life. That where their dignity rests, where the dignity of others rests. And so that when, after this, they become old enough and they start hearing all these things in the news, they can sift through them in a better way. And obviously, in their closer circles and in their relationships, and then later in society, be able to put everything in its proper perspective, as we would want them to do. So thank you for listening to these terms. All these terms, there's lots of literature on it. I'm sure if you looked it up, you could find it. This was just trying to go through it pretty quickly. The terms that society and the church tend to view a little bit differently. And so it's important to start that young and to let you know the distinctions. Thanks for listening to all of this.